Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute Public Teaching in English for Monday, February 5th, 2018. And today we have the first episode or first part of our Exploring Plasma Science series. It's a continuation of the plasma science understanding that we did from the Understanding Plasma Science series last year. And Jim McDonald's going to be leading us for us. So welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Flint. Welcome, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed the series last year on Understanding Plasma Science. This year, we're going to do things slightly differently in that we're going to look at exploring, and so we're going to go into pick a few topics and really go into a little bit of detail on each one of those topics. Sorry, my dog. And for this morning, I'll go into a bit more details when we start the presentation. But first of all, I'd just like to go through the website that we launched last week. Now, I'm going to try to share from my side, Flint, but just tell me if it becomes quite bad.
Okay, yeah, no problem.
Because I was supposed to have been upgraded today, so we'll see. All right, so there's the new website. And as we said, the intention of the website is so that it becomes a destination for people. The amount of knowledge that's out there is just huge. And for new people that are trying to get a handle on the science, it just becomes an impossible task when you look at all those videos in the YouTube channel and one just really doesn't know where to start. So what we've tried to do with this website is to make it a little bit easier for new people and existing people to try to get a flow and understanding of what the science is all about. So in a sense, with the spiral, we start on the outside and work our way in. And as a lot of us have learned, we need to understand the science, and through the science, we understand our soul. And that's the way we've designed the website. So we start off with the science and ultimately into the center with the soul. So I'll start off on the first page. We just gave a very brief introduction as to what the science is all about. We didn't want to go into too much details because with this sort of page, one wants to get a lot of people's attention, and if they just spend half an hour on this page, they will get an understanding. And the important ones are these 5 videos at the bottom here, which when you watch them, they're only 10 minutes long, gives you a great, if you watch all 5, will give you a great understanding of what this technology is all about. So this is your first page where I hope a lot of people will find it quite useful. And then if they're interested, we created the plasma uses because as a lot of us always like to know, okay, well, that's all very nice to have this new science and technology, but how is it really going to affect me and my life? So down here, what we've done is we've just created certain topics, reduced electrical consumption, matter creation, agriculture, and health. So we created a few topics there which would interest quite a wide spectrum of people, where they could see where this technology might impact them in their lives or in the area of interest that they might have. So that was the idea behind this page. And then we go to the Learn More page, and here where it really starts, those that really would like to learn more. If it's intriguing enough, then you can start learning. And you can all do this learning in your own time, so you know you can just progress through it and know where you are. So there was this first 2-hour interview as well, which does give a very broad spectrum of what plasma science is all about. So that's a very good start for people. And then those that watched or haven't watched, we have the 12 parts of plasma science. And in each one of them, we go into the plasma science, the nano and the Gans and health and agricultural aspects. So it goes into more detail of how the science affects all those different fields. And obviously we have the PowerPoints now available for you to download. So there's a lot of information there that one can go through and watch. And then your next leg of the journey is a lot of these kids knowledge seeker workshops. There's 22 of them. And these were done quite a few years ago with Rick and Kayvon. And there's a fantastic resource there because it goes into a lot more detail. If you've understood and watched the first 12 episodes of Understanding Plasma Science, and then you come on to this next section, it will make a lot more sense when you start watching these kids workshops. And even though they are for kids, they're called kids workshops, it's by no means for kids, because when it comes down to this plasma science, we are all children learning. So don't be put off by the title. I know when I first started watching these, trying to get a handle on it, it was probably 2 years ago. When I started watching them, I couldn't even understand a lot of what was going on. So it's great to watch the first 12 now to get a broadest idea of what the technology is all about, and then come down to watch these. And then obviously we have every Thursday evenings, Thursday mornings, we have the normal knowledge seeker workshop, where there's a lot more information. So it's good to watch, to try and study in the background in your own time, and then continue to watch on that Thursday. And then those that are interested and would like to learn more, obviously you can come in and start joining as a private student and join the self-study program. Now we've labeled it the self-study program is because a lot of the work you have to do yourself. There's just too much information, too much knowledge to be able to come to these classes and sit and gain some knowledge. So if you are very serious at finding out more, wanting to learn more, then we do recommend that you become a private student, because essentially what one gets access to, and the main part here, is you get access to all these past teachings from 2015 to present. There's a couple of semesters there with morning and afternoon teachings by Mr. Keshe, which are absolutely invaluable. And one has to watch these many, many times to really get an understanding of all that knowledge. So just those videos alone, I think, could probably take you a year or two to get through on watching and really understanding. So that's a lot of the sort of self-work that you do. And then we do offer for you to come in and interact with other students from around the world. And this year we are starting something new where one can create certain focus groups, little areas of specializing that you would like to do with the other students. And so we've got the one already, which is focusing on all aspects of the soul. So we'll start digging up all the old information about the soul and start putting that information back together again. And then we do offer, we have different plasma science teachers coming from all over the world that do come in and provide certain teachings on different topics. So these are sort of will be offered on an ad hoc basis and in different times when those teachers are available from around the world. So that's essentially what we have then available as a private student. As I say, the most valuable part is to get access and start listening to those older workshops there. A lot of valuable information. Now, the public teachings, we do have, these are just on the English side. So the public testimonials is once a month, where you can come in and just share your experience and your different methods that you've tried in using the plasma, because we gain a lot of insight into that if you come and share. We've got the Knowledge Seeker workshop on Thursday, and Rick's Plasma Reactor Group, and the One Nation, One Planet. And then we have this new Exploring Science on the Monday. And then what we've created here is a Google Calendar, teaching calendar. And essentially what we've put into here is all the public English teachings as well as all the language teachings, public and private. And so this is for the whole year, and one can have a look on a weekly basis. And then down here is the option where you can click on this button and then you can download this calendar into your, if you do have the Google, and then it just updates you have your Google Calendar available. And what it does is it will then signal you 10 minutes before each one of these teachings happens around the world. So when I did the last count, I think there was about 107 different teachings that are happening every single month in sort of the 9-10 different languages. So, and we do encourage you to pop in, even if it is on some of the different languages, because there are a lot of people that are bilingual, and they have quite a lot of knowledge that we can gain from them. We will be working on quite a few joint public teachings with all the different language groups, because everybody from around the world will certainly look at things and approach things differently. So we're starting to share this knowledge and insight with everybody.
Say, Jim.
Yeah.
I noticed that the times there are Eastern Australia time. Is there a way to get that into the person's time?
If you download it into your time, it should change automatically.
Okay.
So, and then we also have a world time buddy.
Yeah.
But these should change into your time zone wherever you are downloaded.
Also, on a side note, could your microphone tends to fade in and out every so often. Could you set your audio Zoom settings to not automatically adjust your mic?
Where do I do that?
It's on your main Zoom panel with the orange and blue buttons. You click on settings and go to audio and turn off the auto adjust mic.
Settings? Sorry, I'm not with you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's correct. Settings.
The audio settings, Jim.
What are your options?
You should be able to access it there. You might have to go to I have to go to actually to video settings option in order to bring up the panel properly when I'm sharing. At least on my Mac, it's that way. Did you find the control panel there?
I must unclick automatically adjust microphone.
Yeah, unclick that and then adjust the volume of the microphone up. Well, not all the way, but probably.
It was all the way, yeah.
Oh, we'll leave it all the way then, yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Then on the language pages, here what we're going to be doing is over the next couple of months is we're going to be adding with the current languages that are being taught, and so we'll be able to click on each one of those and go into their couple of pages that we will develop for each of the languages over the next couple of months. And here again is just a summary of what's been happening in the different languages. So the French have their different workshops, Japanese and the Polish, so there are the different times that one can have a look. And then terms of electronic papers and further information that one can get, over here we have the list of Mr. Keshe's papers that have been written. And so one is able to purchase those and read those papers, which are very specific to those certain topics. And then we have some Kindle books, and these are very, very sort of valuable books. And they've been developed by KF New Zealand. And what he's done is he's taken the very first workshops and put them into a Kindle book. Now, just bear in mind, in terms of our disclaimer here, that what he's done is he's created a summary. So these are not the exact transcriptions that our transcribers do. They are just essentially a summary of these workshops. But it's a very nice way to quickly read through and to see exactly what has happened in those different workshops. And then one can then go back and refer. When you want the exact wording, you can then go back and listen to those exact workshops. But otherwise, these are quite valuable in time to understand and catch up on a lot of the background information. So these go up to, I think, workshop 675 that they have done, and then they will be bringing out some further ones. They also took our Understanding Plasma Science series and made them into books as well. And to say they're also just summaries of the actual workshops, but it's quite a great resource there to quickly have a look and read, because not all of us are audio, some of us do like to read. So those are available there. And they'd also taken the Gardeners and Growers workshop series that we had done and made these into the Kindle books. So there's quite a lot of valuable information in these. So anybody interested in agriculture or certain areas can look at these books. And over the time, we will be adding more and more to these, so it will help for a lot of people. And then on the resources page, we have the links to Wiki, knowledge seeker workshops, and the blueprint teachings on how to build your own maggrav unit, the agriculture and nature, and then on-site workshops for those who would like to run and hold on-site workshops. And then we have some affiliates here, which is the Transformer.com and Golden Age of Gans. And Transformer.com have also done quite a lot of work and created a lot of summaries. Very interesting website on summaries on all the different workshops. Again, it's just summaries and not the actual transcripts, but it does help a lot to get through that information. And then there's a lot of links here of the different sites and Facebooks and forums. To become a transcriber, we are always looking for people to transcribe and translate. So if anybody is very interested and has a couple of hours to spare every week, your service would be mostly appreciated. And those that have sort of been following for quite a while and have quite a good background on the knowledge and you'd like to teach in your language, then just get in touch with us and we can help you to start, because the more languages we can build up over the next couple of months will be great. And so here you can just fill in your details and then we can get back to you. And then we come back to the very last, where the science meets the soul. And so here again, we're just looking at, our world has been so split between science and spirituality, but essentially this technology brings it together. And so we can look at, by understanding the science, we can begin to understand how our soul operates. So what we've just done with these ones to get sort of people very interested and wanting to learn more is that we found three nice passages which explains, what is the soul of the man, the neutron, proton, and electron, and the other one that we found was understanding the creation. And so this is just the tip of the iceberg of information that is there available on the soul. We will be adding a lot more over time. There's a lot of information on the blueprint for peace humanity, those workshops that we've done in July last year, and then everything since then. So we'll be adding to this as well. And essentially what we're saying here as well is, once you realize everything comes down to our soul, then we ask that you go back again to the beginning and go through and learn again, but from the perspective of the soul, because then you'll have a far deeper understanding of this technology. So we hope that this helps a lot of new people out there to try and get a handle on this technology, and a lot of us that have been studying and trying to study as well. And so the website will be continually updated all the time as we gather more and more information. So if you can just use it as a nice resource base and use it to teach yourself, because the whole idea is one has to take responsibility for yourself and for your own teaching. No one's going to come and teach you. You have to do it yourself. So through this website, we hope that we at least make it a little bit easier for you to do that. All right. Okay, so I'm now going to go into today's presentation on exploring plasma science. And it's going to be a little bit different, is that over the next 10 weeks, we'll have different plasma science teachers that will come. So there'll be sort of somebody different every week. And they're going to share their knowledge and experience in the different areas of the plasma science. Oh, I don't have anything there. All right, so one of the areas that we're going to look at today is different concepts of plasma. So we're not going to create sort of a long series like we did last year. We're going to focus on different topics and go into them a little bit more in detail. And for example, next week we'll have Dr. Kwatwa, who's going to come in and go into a lot of detail on different definitions and the different wording, because it's so important to understand what each concept, what each definition of the word actually means. We'll have Lisa that will come in and give us some more information on different aspects of the soul. And then we'll have Sandor that will come in and will help a lot of us with the nano and Gans, because there's always so many questions on that area. And then we'll also be looking at different topics on agriculture. And then we will be doing a bit of what we call sort of global teaching. So we will be visiting the Polish team and the French team for this coming semester as well. So that's just a broad overview of what's going to be happening for this first semester. Before we start, I'm just putting in a bit of a disclaimer so that what we're saying is that a lot of us are, as the teachers kind of come in and teach is we are all still learning, just like all of you. So what we're going to be presenting is our understanding and interpretation of the work presented by Mr. Keshe. And sometimes we might not, our understanding might not be exactly right, or understanding from just a different point of view. So we're just wanting to sort of make that clear, and that we then encourage a lot of you to test and explore yourself and go and find out about this knowledge, and just come back and share with us, because it is so vast and so huge that none of us can get it right the first time, and then none of us are wrong. It's just our understanding and interpretation of this information. And we're all learning together. So today, the two topics that I'm going to cover and go into a bit more detail is understanding our environment, and then going into a little bit more detail on the amino acid structure. So on the first one, and what I'd like to do as well is, last year when we did the Understanding Plasma Science, I specifically wanted to keep the questions at the end, and I did that for a reason. But for these workshops now, it's going to be a bit more of an open session. So please welcome any questions as we're going along this presentation. If people have comments or their own experiences, then we do welcome that. Please keep it short and to the point and relevant to the topics. Okay, so understanding the environment. We know that the magnetic fields lead to creation. And when we read the sentence, when magnetic fields come together and become one entity of a plasma, it has to create its own position in respect to the other plasmas. So when you break that sentence down, it's when the plasma is formed from the magnetic fields and creates its own entity, that entity, if we can imagine it as a magnet, now has to interact with all the other entities around it. So due to its strength, it has to find its position amongst all the other plasmas around it. So that's essentially what we are trying to explain in that sentence. Have you got that video available there, Flint?
Which one again?
It's just the interacting of the fields, just that little short video.
Ah, yes, one moment here.
I think a lot of us have seen this video, but it's essentially just illustrating how the individual magnetic rays, when they find a match and with another magnetic ray of a similar strength, then they'll start and begin to interact. And this is the formation in the beginning of your plasma. And now that becomes an entity of itself with its own field strength. And it then has to find its position in relation to all the other plasmas around it. So essentially that's what that first statement is explaining. Thank you, Flint.
Yes, you're welcome.
I'm sure you've seen that many times. Okay, so when we look at our solar system, we have to imagine the same. And so the fields are coming together in different positions to create the planets that we see. So we imagine our solar system as a huge plasma. Then fields are coming together in different positions, which create our planets. And the planets have to find their position in relation to all the other planets. And on Earth, the fields come together in their different positions, and we create the man, the plants, or the animals. So it's the same concept, the same understanding. So magnetic fields in motion. So these magnetic fields in a given environment or condition find their position according to the magnetic and gravitational strength of itself in relation to all the other plasmas. So what we're saying there is itself has to find its position, and it's not just independently of itself, but it finds its position in relation to all the other plasmas around it. So everything around it will affect it as well. So the magnetic fields of a similar strength come together to form, and for example, the Earth within our solar system. And we only get these fields in motion because of an imbalance, the flow from the stronger to the weaker. The imbalance leads to the division, and we've all understood how the neutron dividing into a proton and an electron, and that is caused by the imbalance. And it's this division which leads to new life, because without that dividing of the neutron into the proton and electron, we wouldn't have life. So without an imbalance, we have no creation, no flow of magnetic fields. And we have to understand this concept when we start making our different devices, whether it's for health, energy, or agriculture, is one needs to always create a flow of magnetic fields. Because without a flow, there is no imbalance, and then there's no life. So in all our devices, we have to have that flow from stronger. And for example, when we look on the health section with your patches on either side of your arm or your leg, it's, we've been taught it's the stronger 3-to-1 ratio. So it's the stronger through to the weaker patch, and it's this flow that we create. So we have to understand that we have to create that flow of these fields. Any device or any application that we are going to be using this technology. Right. We know, and we've learned from last year, that Earth is a plasma and has specific magnetic or gravitational field strength. We as humans and the plants and all creatures in Earth, so we are living within this plasma, live in this environment and condition that is created on Earth. We also know that our body is a plasma and has a specific magnetic gravitational field strength, and everything within our body is subject to this magnetic field strength. Our little cells, our little organs, is all operating within our body. So it's this understanding of different environments and conditions becomes very important when we look at our different ganses that we've made and how we actually use them. Now, if we assume that this is sort of a plasma and it might be the Earth or a solar system, the fields are coming out from the center and flowing to the outer boundary. So you have this interaction of these fields within the plasma, and the plasma works in one way. is they release their energy as they interact. Without that interaction, we don't have that release. And another way to explain that is on this graph is if you take that yellow dot and we look at as a center of our solar system, but it could be the center of an atom, center of a plasma. When you look at the vertical axis, you look at the strength of the field. So we go right up, the stronger we go. And on the horizontal axis, it's distance from the center. So the closest we are, what this graph is illustrating, the closer we are to the center is the stronger the field. As we move away from the center, so the strength of the field reduces. So it's this weaker plasma in strength which leads to the matter itself. We get the boundary or the Coulomb barrier. These are the fields that are so weak that they convert to the hydrogen and helium. We're looking at it on our solar system. So as the fields are coming out from the sun and come to the outer edges of our solar system, they are so weak that they convert to the hydrogen and helium and then start coming back in again. And we get this balance point of the interaction of our solar system within the maglev fields of the galaxy. So one has to understand that our solar system as a plasma is operating within the galaxy, which is another plasma. And our solar system has to find its position, and it's also interacting with the fields of the galaxy. And it's this balance point of interaction that we get all the time. The coexistence and interaction of magnetic and gravitational field forces leads to the creation of our magnetosphere for the entity. So every entity, whether it's the atom, the Earth, or the galaxy, has a magnetosphere, what we call it. For Earth, that's what we've called it. This boundary is the maximum point of balance or equality between the two magnetic field forces, being magnetic and gravitational. So this is where we get the manifestation of the matter. It's where the fields slow down enough for us to be able to see them with our eyes. It's the slowing down of these fields. So that was a bit of the understanding, a bit of the science, and what I want to do next is to take those couple of concepts and let's put it into everyday uses that we can, and in terms of the Ganses that we've all made. So it's a case of understanding we've made the Gans, but now we have to understand the different conditions that we are going to be placing our Gans. To understand these concepts is, if one looks at the copper atoms, and you look at the copper atoms on this plate, they are subject to Earth's magnetic gravitational field strength, and that's what we see as the matter. The atoms, the plasmas are very, very close together. We've learned about the nano copper, and we create our nano layering. So when we create the nano copper, what we've done is we've placed our copper plates into a box with caustic soda. And it's not just a case of putting it into caustic soda. That caustic soda is creating a different condition, a different environment. And it's creating a new magnetic or gravitational environment of a different strength. And within that environment, it's allowing the copper atoms to move and create our spacing on our nano layering. So, it's not just as simple. We have to understand why we're putting it into the caustic. It's not just caustic for the sake of caustic. That caustic is creating a certain environment, a certain field strength that allows these atoms to find new positioning. It's that caustic environment with the heat which allows us to do that. So we've created a totally new environment in that of sort of the Earth all around us. So we've essentially started we've got the same copper atom, but we've changed the magnetic gravitational field strength of that environment, and we've created our nanolayering just by changing that environment in which we operate in. So it's the same atom of copper, but it's just opened up, allowing each atom to find its new position. And we have the wider spacing, allowing the fields of the copper atom more space to flow. Now, when we look at our copper GaNs, when we make our copper GaNs, we are again creating a different magnetical and gravitational field strength environment. We've got our two plates in the water, and we add our salt, and this configuration creates a specific field strength in that water. And within this new environment, we start creating our copper GaNs, the copper atom joining up with the oxygen to form our copper oxide GaNs. So again, we've created a totally new environment, different magnetic gravitational field strength for this to occur. Now we've got our copper GaNs, and we've taken it out that box, and we've washed and washed and washed, and now we place it into a jar of distilled water. Again, we've taken that GaNs, and now within that distilled water environment, it also again has that water has a specific magnetic gravitational field strength environment dictated by the field strength of that water. So each GaNs in the water is free to find its own position and distance in respect to each other in that water. And that's why when you look at the GaNs, it's always very fluffy and flowing in that water, because if you view each little GaNs as a tiny little magnet, it finds, you know, when you shake your bottle up, it finds its sort of position and takes a long time to settle. Each GaNs is different because we've now placed that GaNs in the environment of the water. So now we get the question, how many of you have dried the GaNs and used the GaNs as a dried powder? Any takers? Okay, so when you dry it, you've got to understand that you are taking your GaNs out of that environment of the water, and you are now placing it in the environment of Earth, which has a different magnetical gravitational field strength. So now we end up with the dried GaNs. So essentially, when you've dried your copper GaNs, you are now dictating different conditions, because it's not in the water environment, it's now in the atmosphere of Earth's environment. So this GaNs is going to express itself differently in its new environment. And this new environment has a different magnetic field strength from that magnetic field strength of the water. So we would call it in our terms of science that we've understood is that we would say, well, GaNs will have different properties in the water, and it'll have different properties if we dry it. But essentially what we're saying is that the environments that we've created are different. We have different magnetic gravitational field environments for our GaNs. An important point here to remember is that it's the environment in which we place our GaNs, or the plasma, in conjunction with that plasma itself, will dictate what the plasma will express itself as, what fields it gives off and takes in. And this is important to understand, is that when we have the GaNs in the water, it's the GaNs itself and in conjunction with its environment, which is dictating the interaction and release of these fields. So we are we've understood we're imparting the fields into the water of the Gans, and then you're drinking that water. When we take that Gans and we dry it, we've now got it in the what we would call our atmosphere environment of Earth, but it's a different magnetic or gravitational field environment. And so this dried Gans in interaction with the new environment is going to express itself differently, and it's going to give off and take in different fields, and will have a different effect on it. And then the same questions is how many of us have then put this dried Gans back into the distilled waters? And was the energy the same when you felt it? Does it have the same effect when you use it in your different health products? These are the questions, because now we've changed the condition and now we're putting it back into an entirely new environment. And so these are all the different questions we have to start asking ourselves and start finding different applications for them, because we created different conditions all along the way. And each condition, I'm sure over time, we're going to find will have very specific uses, whether it be in health, agriculture, or energy. Just before we move on, when one takes this dried Gans and puts it back in the water, as you see in the photograph, it doesn't settle very well to the bottom. So please do not consume any of the water off the top of the dried Gans that one places into this water, because it's not settling. It's a different environment. We've changed the conditions. So if you start drinking that water, it's going to contain a lot of the Gans material, which we don't want you to consume. So whenever you dry any Gans and put it back into the water, please do not use that water for any applications, particularly for the health. Okay, so many of us are also playing around with our different spinning reactors. We're all having a lot of fun. I know I've got quite a few of them, and they're always spinning in the house, and we're trying different combinations. Now, again, we're looking at putting the dried Gans with the water in these reactors and seeing if there's a difference. Do we feel any difference, or are we seeing any different effects by doing it? Because the normal Gans that we've had with the water is subject to a certain environment, and now when we dry the Gans and put it back into the water, we've again changed that environment. And so we're going to have that Gans is going to express itself differently and give off different fields and interact with the field around us differently. So one has to observe and take note of these changes. And I encourage a lot of people to experiment with this, and to please come back with feedback, because each one of these is all going to learn what this effect is doing. And again, what if you mix the dried Gans in an alcohol? Because the alcohol is different to the water. The alcohol will have a different magnetic or gravitational field strength. We've changed the environment, so we're changing that interaction of that plasma with the environment of the alcohol, and so we're going to have different fields interacting. So we have to understand, and what I'm hoping you got across is that every time we do something different to this Gans, we are creating a different condition. And the plasma has a specific structure in releasing its energy, and that specific structure of release of energy is dependent on its environment and not of itself. It's where we put this Gans, whether it's in the sort of the wet Gans form or the dried Gans, or mixing with water, alcohol, or even adding a bit of salt solution to our Gans, is all going to have different effects on that Gans in terms of its release of its energy. And the plasma only interacts when a specific condition is created. So we'll have to find out all these different effects. Creating a condition in water, alcohol, dictates what you give and receive from an environment. Each one is different. So when we're playing with our Gans, understand what you are doing, and understanding that every time we're doing something differently with it, we are creating different conditions. You are going to see different effects, different release of the energies. Again, something to experiment with and to explore what effects it is. You know, what if we start mixing the liquid Gans with the dried Gans? Is a terrible photograph there, but we've done that with the copper, mixed dried Gans with the normal copper Gans. You know, one is physicality, one is emotion. The dried is the physical one, and the wet Gans is the emotion. You know, if you put those CO2, dried CO2 and zinc and mix that with the normal CO2 and zinc Gans and put those in your reactors, what are you going to feel? What different energies are you going to be creating? Essentially, we are, you know, what we have to understand is we're dealing with the same plasma. It's a collection of fields. How that plasma expresses itself is dependent on the environment's magnetic field strength, as well as the magnetic field strength of the plasma itself. So you've got two factors. One is the plasma, the Gans itself, and one is the environment in which you are putting that plasma. The flow of the fields from the plasma and back into the plasma is environmental dependent, you know, because the water will be different to alcohol, will be different to a salt solution, will be different to the air environment. So essentially, when we look, we've got a copper plate and it's still copper. We don't really feel any fields from that. When we create nano-copper, we can start feeling the energies even just from the nano-copper. We create the copper Gans, and a lot of us start feeling the energy from that copper Gans. All is the plasma of copper, but it's just expressing itself differently depending on the environment. Any questions or comments?
Hi, Jim. This is Dimitri. I have a question.
Yes.
Good morning. It's relating to the slide that had the graph on it.
Yes.
Where at the bottom right of that graph, it said that the fields become so weak that they transmute into hydrogen and nitrogen. Now, and that's the fields from Earth. Now, looking at it from a microcosm, macrocosm view, the fields that we give off as human beings in the physicality, do our fields also, when they get to a weaker state, transmute into hydrogen and nitrogen? And you know, that's looking at it from just the general physicality. But then if we look at the inside, the shell of the physicality, do we give off fields from organs of our body that turn to hydrogen? Oh, it's helium. Turn to hydrogen and helium inside the body? Do they, you know, do they become that weak inside that we create the hydrogen and helium? And then when the fields of the physicality are given off around planet Earth, do those fields turn to hydrogen and helium within the Coulomb barrier of Earth, or is it something that all happens in deep space? Thank you.
What one has to understand is that each plasma is different. You've got your plasma of the solar system, and you've got the plasma of Earth, and you've got the plasma of the body. Each one is in a different environment, because when we look at the solar system is within the galaxy, the magnetic gravitational field of the galaxy. So those two are going to be interacting and creating this distance. And what, in our solar system, this is what is created in another solar system, depending on the outside environment of the galaxy. Our solar system could be bigger and smaller, and it will have different hydrogen or helium at those boundaries, depending on the size of the galaxy, of a solar system. And we can't just say that when we bring it down to our body that, oh, well, we also will give off hydrogen and helium, because it's different fields, it's different strengths. Our body is giving off certain energies, but it's not hydrogen or the helium, but it's energies of a different field strength that is probably don't measure. I don't know. It's a good question, but it's not. We can't say, well, because it's the solar system does this, so our body will do it, because we're dealing with different magnetic gravitational field strengths of our body. Our body is not the same as a solar system. Does that answer your question? That's what I've understood.
Yes, it does. Thank you. It makes me wonder because as fields transmute, as they become weaker, it's all gonna, because we're on Earth and we're a Cohan amino acid. There's, for all the fields that are created on Earth, that it doesn't matter. From my understanding, it doesn't matter where they're created. The path of transmutation going back to the source is always going to be the same. So, and that's because of the Cohan base is the way I was looking at it.
The more we learn, the more questions we have, and sometimes we just don't have the answers. So that means we have to go back and study some more.
Yes, thank you.
Just as a reminder, if you're in live stream, Facebook or YouTube watching us, you can type your questions into the chat there. Or if you're on the panelists, just go ahead and unmute and ask your question. Or if you're in the attendees, please raise your hand.
Jim, this is Moshfik speaking.
Yes.
My question is regarding, you talked about rotating the plasma balls with motors. My question is regarding creating rotation without the magnetic fields we are using in the motor to create the rotation. Has there been, do you have any progress or any suggestion of how to do it? I have some thoughts, but please share anything that you may know.
Oh, so you're asking creating rotation without the motors?
Yes.
Yeah, you do that by creating that flow of energy. So if you look at your two patches, so that's just, you've got your strong patch and your weak patch on either side of your arm. You're essentially just creating a flow of energy from the stronger to the weaker. Okay. Now, if you take that same concept, and I know we've done it, if you build a couple of tube units that you stand in, like Dr. Rodrigo, and if you have, say, 10 rings around you, if you're standing there, each ring that you create will have if you build them so that they have slightly different composition, different volume, different Gans that you're putting into each one, what you are doing is creating a flow of energy. So you're creating that dynamic flow itself without the rotating motors.
So you're talking about flow between the rings in that case, because each ring is in different, has different strength.
Yes. Yes, each ring will different strengths. So each one is going to interact with the other one below it, above it. And if you create one sort of opposite right at the top and right at the bottom, You're creating a flow between the top and the bottom. So you can, it's difficult to imagine, but when you begin to understand the flow of the fields, one can start creating many devices where you can create a flow of energy without the rotation of the motors.
Yes, I have done it in Gans, but it's actually, it's not that difficult. But one of the things that we are tied to the physical motor or the physical rotation of the liquid.
Yes.
So in doing it, you have to just like, if you spin a ball like a cricket ball as you're bowling, you spin the ball. So you have two fingers on one side, you're creating the rotation. So in a way, the plasma, there has to be a plasma differential between the two sides.
Yes.
And I have seen it, I mean, I have done it myself, actually. You can rotate the field. The thing is that, how do you measure it? I can feel the difference, but it's doable, actually. And the star formation is a good example of creating this differential. And so my question is, yes, you can feel it a little bit, but how do you, I mean, we don't have measuring instrument at this point. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that one of the ways to do it is like, if you have two balls with the reverse, the inner is stronger and the outer is weaker, and the other one, the inner is stronger and the outer, no, I'm saying the reverse of the two balls are sort of loaded in reverse. And it's kind of like, I want to kind of create something along the line of like sun's field interacting with the Earth's field, and you see light. So that's one of the ways to see that the fields are interacting and you have light. So has anybody been able to create this kind of light phenomena with the interaction of fields? So then you know that the two fields are rotating and interacting, a physical manifestation that we can see. I haven't reached that level, but I know the fields are rotating by feeling. But beyond that, I don't know.
I'm in the same boat. You know, you get quite sensitive and you start feeling, you know, and so you change different reactors, different positions, whatever devices you create, and you get a sense, because you can detect these changes in the fields. In terms of instrumentation, no, none of us have created anything yet. So it's all a case of trial and error. And I don't know if anybody else.
Yeah, the thing is that if we have some idea of the range in which the light would be created, or heat or sound, whatever the case may be, then it's easy to play. Once you know close to that range, you can play around a little bit. But unless if you don't know the range in which that reaction would happen, then it's then it will require quite a bit of trial and error. But anyway, I was trying to make some educated guesses. That's why I'm talking.
Yeah, I think we'd all like to do that, create the light. And it's understanding, you know, what light is created through the interaction of the sun and the earth. So, you know, you need to replicate that and understand that. It's all things that we will, over time, I'm sure we'll all learn. I mean, it's become
I've done some experiments with listening to rotating reactors with a simple crystal radio circuit, which is basically sort of like listening to static with your regular AM radio, you might say. But I do a special system where the signal from the crystal radio goes into the computer, and you modify the sound, amplify it, and change the pitch. And you can actually hear sounds coming from the rotating reactors, like the ones you showed there, that the plastic ones, they have a particular property of having a frequency that's given off. And as you increase the speed, the frequency actually increases with the crystal radio. And that's not just the motor frequency I'm talking about, because even when the motor's shut off or the motor is totally disconnected, it still produces a certain frequency in the basically in the radio range, which is in the kilohertz range. So there is definitely fields being given off by these rotating reactors, and in ways that can be measured. I mean, you could also measure the sound that comes off of it as it rotates, because that's a type of field that comes off. You can also feel the wind that comes off of it. That's another type of sensing. You can feel it on your skin, or you can feel the breeze. It's another type of vortex going on, actually, that's because of its interaction with the atmosphere. And there's other types of fields that can be measured too. Some people measure with the Y-shaped stick, the dowsing technique, or others might use the pendulum technique, can also be sensitive. Some people have, what is it called? The Bovis spectrum?
Bovis scale, yeah.
Scale. Mm-hmm. And that's, I don't know how accurate, objectively that is, but it seems to be able to, it seems like the people that are good at it can tell a difference between one thing and another, basically, in differences in the field strength, which is what we're kind of shooting for.
Yeah. I'll just give you an example of, I built 3 reactors and I put them in my greenhouse, spinning there. So they're about 1.5 meters apart. And in the mornings, I would notice, I would come into the greenhouse, and the early morning, just as the sun is rising, and I would notice that my motors were quite noisy. Yet if I'd go there in the afternoon, they would be running very, very quiet, almost purring, very, very still. And then again in the evening, they would end up being quite noisy. So I sort of observed this for a few days. And it's the change. In one of the mornings, I had walked into the greenhouse, and all the motors you could sense they were all adjusting, different speeds, changing. And one of them actually switched off for about 10 seconds and then switched back on again. So it's a case of those fields were running, and it set up a nice field overnight. And then in the morning, you are walking in and you're disturbing those fields. And that disturbance is causing them to adjust. You are coming in with your own fields, and you are adjusting. So they are having to adjust to interact with your fields. And we've noticed that, say, particularly in the mornings and the evenings, because the mornings is when the sun is coming up. So it's the sun's fields interacting with the 3 reactors that is changing, and they're having to change and adjust. And it's the same in the evening when the sun is going down. They're having to change and react to the different environments and the fields. So that was quite a fascinating observation to notice with the spinning reactors.
Hi, Jim.
Yes.
Hello, it's Jalal here.
Hi, Jalal.
Hi. Can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
To measure the fields, that there is one in the private teaching, 2015, November. Mr. Keshe, he explained the right way to measure your strength, the Gans' strength, and how you create this Ganses with the strength what you have from the coils. So anyone who is not in the private teaching, I will urge him to go and sign himself to the private teaching. And if he is in the private teaching, go to the teachings of November 2015, and Mr. Keshe, he explained very well, and you can experiment. It's very easy way to do that. It's the same thing when you are with your ganses. If it's in the plasma, liquid plasma, or dried Gans, or you add the dried Gans to the distilled water. You in the first one, the plasma condition, it's dictate itself because it's free. In the second one, when you dry it, you dictate the position and the condition from what you want from it. And if you put a distilled water to the dry Gans, you are controlling the strength of it and what you want from it to do. The plasma need a little bit understanding how it is interaction and what is giving and what is taking. And that you can play so much. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Joel. Do you want to share a little bit on what you learned from those workshops? Your understanding?
Oh, a lot. But unfortunately, I'm at work, and when I'm getting 1 minute here, 2 minutes here, quiet, I can jump in.
Okay.
Yeah. In the Friday, we learned something that you feel the fields with your hand. But also this is what Caroline taught in that private teaching, how you feel that fields you with your hands. Look, the problem here, when Mr. Keshe teaching, no one go to the teaching. When Caroline teach, no one go to the teaching. Well, only we take the service of it to understand, but no one really go to that. But when someone of us teach the same thing what Mr. Keshe said, explain it. Okay, this guy, he done it. Okay, I can do it. You can do everything. Just have little bit, what you call it, trust in yourself that you can do everything and all of it. The teaching is very simple, very, very simple. Don't take it as if it's something come from the universe. You are not fit for it, or you are not in that position that you can do. The teaching of Mr. Keshe and Caroline and all of the teachers is very simple. When you think that you learn a little bit, one thing, just go and do it. Don't leave it until you understand everything and then you go back to it, because you will lose everything. Anything come to your head, just go and do it in the same time if you can, and then you will find amazing things. Because if you continue studying and studying and studying and you go back to what you done, you will see it in different shape, in different way. You will adjust it, you will add to it, you will do it in different shape. The main thing, what I want to say, the feeling with the hand, where is the controller of that? It's in our emotion side. It's in the head. This is the controller. Now you know how to do it. Now you need to control it. And if you want to control it, you need to tap in the emotion side. And even this emotion side, Mr. Keshe explained it in the private teaching, how you tap to the emotion side, the source of your soul of man. And that is the emotion. In the private teaching, there is so many things, guys. I really, if someone is not in the private teaching, go and join the private teaching. You will learn so many things. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jalal. Yeah, the important point you brought up there, Jalal, and thanks for that, is that we need to experiment. And that's why I named these workshops Exploring Plasma Sciences, because without you getting your hands dirty in a way and making the plasmas and fiddling with them and trying this and trying that. There's no wrong way of doing something. Just learn from it. See what happens. Do it this way, do it that way. And you gain immense experience from that and knowledge. So you have to play with this and have fun. That's the bottom line. So, you can't do anything wrong. Can't make mistakes. It's a case of having fun with this, but you need to play with it and explore.
And can I add one thing, Jim, please?
Go ahead.
I really have a beautiful and fun with the fields, feeling the fields in the hand. It's really joyful and it's really funny and sometimes it's scary. But if you know the purpose of it, you will go higher. You will go to the control system, and that is the emotion. This is the target. That you know where is your emotion set. What is the control of your emotion? Everything we have here, Ganses and reactors and amino acids, it's all tools to teach at last everything that we have it inside us. Once you practice it, once you experience it, once you make it with your hand, as a Ganses, as energy, as everything, then you know that everything is inside you. You don't need to go out. You just bring out what is inside you. That's all.
Fantastic, Jalal. It's exactly that. All these are that we've gone through this whole process of nano coating and making the Gans and making the different devices. It's all been to show us that these fields do exist, and it's to build our confidence in interacting with these fields and knowing that we can be the one, that we are creating these fields and we are the creator. So it's all just tools down the road to help us, because we're so physical as a human being, but it helps us to understand that everything comes down to the energies in the fields and that we have this enormous potential. And if we can build our confidence through the physical at first, but then we build our confidence in operating through our soul. So it's all just a journey and a path that we all have to follow to really try and break from our very physical environment. Anybody else before we move on?
I don't see any other questions coming in the other.
I never know whether it's a good sign or a bad sign. So.
Oh, I have someone here. Hold on. Yes, Mark.
Now, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I had a different experience. I had ordered the powdered Gans, and I have been using them for health. Now, can you point out exactly why I shouldn't be? And I seem to have decent results or good results, but maybe I was thinking that maybe I've been eating the big box store pizza and I haven't tasted a handcrafted pizza, because you're saying they're not to be used for health.
I'm talking of drinking the water off the top, because it will always contain a lot more of the nanoparticles in there. And if you're going to use it in, I suppose I should have rephrased it better, but if you're going to be using it in patches or different devices where you are not going to be consuming it, then yes, by all means, but not to consume that water.
Well, I've made coffee and things with it and drank it just as water. Once it's all precipitated out and I've extracted like the third off the top. It seemed to work for me. I don't know if it was my intentions because I've made pain patches and I was always wondering why they were cool. And now I know that, you know, there's some plasma working when it is cool. I've put it on the plants and they seem to be greener and more vibrant, the outside plants over the summer. And so maybe what Jalal said made me want to say something, because I did put intentions into the powdered Gans. And then I just refill it up and use it that way out of like the mason jar. And then I elevated it a little because I saw what John was doing by putting the Gans, have it in a container and that container in a much larger container. So that's what I've done there. So if I want to tap off some CH3 water, I can do that. Or if I want to tap off the CO2 or whatever. So I thought I had quite good results, but again, maybe I'm driving a Volkswagen and I haven't gotten to
the problem is in the possibility of building up nanoparticles inside your body and so on. This is what happens, for example, with the lab rats. They had trace bits of nanoparticles that build up that may or may not do damage, but you don't know if you're taking nanoparticles or not, because the dry material just doesn't go to the bottom like was talked about earlier. And Mr. Keshe has been very adamant about this and very clear to never ingest the nanoparticles, never.
But like I said, it was in another container. When I put it in, it's in a glass jar, and then I have it in another container. So all the top of the glass jar is interacting with the bigger water in the larger container, and the Gans is on the bottom of the glass jar.
It appears, you got to understand one thing about the Gans. It's a nanoparticle. Nanoparticles are actually invisible. You cannot see them unless they're conglomerated together. So what happens is some of those nanoparticles could be in the top layer of your water and you would see them. That's what Mr. Keshe is saying. And in that case, you would have all the great effects, but you would also be building up nanoparticles in your body and in the organs of your body, which may not be beneficial. And this is not something that the Keshe Foundation or Mr. Keshe is willing to experiment with people. It's just not.
Can I ask one question, please?
Yes.
I also want to.
And the instruction of Keshe Foundation, when they send you powder, they really issue that you filter it, you put it in filter, and you filter all the Gans.
Well, it's very clear. You never use the dried Gans reconstituted with water internally. Never, ever, period. And just leave it at that simple rule. And I think it's very clear. Mr. Keshe has been very clear. The Keshe Foundation is very clear. Keshe Foundation does not want any liability from any misuse of the instructions about the dried Gans, which has been, like I say, very clear over several workshops. Keshe has talked about this and others and so on in the Keshe Foundation. And this is the policy. If you want to experiment with it on yourself.
No, I didn't. When I first ordered it, when I was first looking at the Ganses, I went on the website and there was a choice between the liquid and the powder. And for whatever reason, I just thought they were the same and I chose the powders.
Yeah, it should be more clear that it should not be for internal use. The powder was designed to put on the coils of the...
Right, I learned that later.
Or other...
Right. But it still seemed to work on a toothache, on the pain patches, and so on.
Personally, I would tend to agree, but as far as the policy of Mr. Keshe and the Foundation, which is what we're trying to present in these workshops, not just people's opinions of the situation. We have to know what Mr. Keshe has directed. And
I agree.
Specific,
I agree. I'm still learning.
Yeah, we all are, and that's a big one because you know, I know lots of people have had good effects, especially with, you know, just the CO2 GANs and so on. But it also depends on what GANs are you talking about, and then suddenly people are starting to ingest some of the wrong kinds of GANSs, and the particles are involved, and so on. So it's just not a good technique to be using, except for coils and like the pads, like was mentioned before. It's a great way to do the pads, perhaps.
But if I replace them all with the liquid GANs, that's fine.
Replace all the which?
What I'm using instead of the powder. I noticed that neither one of them are now available, at least here.
Yeah, you would have to make your own GANs.
Right. And I'm doing that, and I'm working on it.
Selling the liquid GANs at this point, yes.
Right. Okay. Very good. I appreciate the clarification.
You could go to one of the local workshops. Would be a great way to learn the proper, you know, if it was the Keshe workshops, which are becoming more and more available to people's local areas in the last while. I think there's probably around maybe 100 workshop teachers at this point, spread across the world. So there's a good likelihood there might be one in your area, and check in the community.Keshe Foundation site has the workshop map there, and contacts and so on for workshops that are coming up.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Rick.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we finished that section on understanding, and so of playing around and understanding the different conditions that one is creating all the time for your GANs. And so one has to always think in plasma terms and not in our physical science aspects that we've always been taught. All right, so the next section is just to go a bit more detail on our amino acids that we've all sort of collected along the way when we've made our GANs. As you said, the amino acid we keep is still in our salt solution because we just take it off the top and keep it in our salt. So when we have a look at the amino acid structure, a very basic structure, we have carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen. Each one is an individual plasma, and it has its own magnetosphere, just like the Earth. And these elements are in a Gans state within the body. So from now on in, all we're talking about is what is inside our body as a Gans state, not in the physical state. As a review from last year, when we have a look at the interaction of two plasmas with the fields, it's essentially the fields exiting the one magnet, if you want to call the magnets plasmas, and entering the bottom of the next one. And this is how they will keep their distance from each other. So you have the one flowing out into the bottom of the other one, and same. And so you have this flow interaction between the two, and depending on the strength of either one, they will keep their certain distance between each other. Now, when you put this in as the amino acid, collectively they come together to form the amino acid structure. And collectively they form a new magnetosphere, a new magnetical gravitational field stream. And so this is now one plasma, it's the plasma of the amino acid structure. So as an individual carbon on its own, it has its plasma and a magnetosphere, but in combination, an interaction of these four coming together, they are forming their own entity, their own magnetosphere, and that is the amino acid. When we have a look at the field interaction of the two plasmas of sodium and chlorine, which is our salt, sodium chloride, it's the same. We have the sodium and we have the chlorine plasma, and they're interacting just like the two magnets in a Gans state in this plasma condition, and again together they form what we know as salt, and it creates a new magnetosphere, a new gravitational field strength. So the combination of the two and the interaction of the two creates its own new strength, and this is now what we call the one plasma. So now when we look at that sort of collectively, we've got our amino acid and we've got our salt that we have in our amino acid, and collectively they will then form a new magnetosphere, a new gravitational field strength. And this is now one plasma. So for example, this could be the plasma of our blood in combination with the iron, or it could be the plasma of the blood of the plants if it's in combination with magnesium. So it becomes an active dynamic plasmatic material, and we have to start understanding this in what's really happening in the body and in a Gans state. Is it's the interaction of the fields that come together that create, and that combination together creates a new magnetosphere. It was what we know as the amino acid structure, or salt. You know, in a plasma condition, we look at how much of the field which the whole of the molecular plasma creates can connect to one another. So you look at the sodium chloride and amino acid, and it's the fields of the two that begin to interact and find a match and bond, and together they then create that new structure. And so one has to start beginning to understand it's not the chemistry that we've always understood. It's a totally different way of understanding what's happening within our body, within the plasma condition in the Gans state. When you look at these two, the sodium chloride has a bigger pull, a bigger attraction. So it's sort of a bigger magnet compared to your amino acid structure. And so this doesn't allow any fields of the plasma inside the amino acid to link up with anything else. And so from a health perspective, this is quite important to understand, and even when we start delving into the agricultural understanding of what's happening inside of a plant, we have to start looking at it on this basis. So it's sort of essentially two plasmas, two magnets, and we can view the sodium chloride as the slightly bigger one, and it has that bigger attraction and pull on our amino acid, and so we get the link up with our amino acid with the salt solution. So what we have to do is, I just thought I'd bring that in today as a little bit of a taster, because we have to start looking at everything in a plasmatic condition, in the body, the plants, the animals, and insects. Not anymore in a physical state on what we've understood as we've been taught as chemistry, as single bonds, double bonds. It all comes down to plasmatic conditions where we have the interaction of fields between the different plasmas. And in plasmatic condition, it's every element in that structure counts as is all a sphere of its own plasma. So each one in that amino acid structure, even your hydrogen as its own separate plasma, counts to create that structure, the new plasma of the amino acid. So we need to look at how the plasma connects with each other at the atomic and molecular plasma. And it's all, if you view it and imagine it as sort of tiny little magnets, just to try and get your mind around it, they're all sort of interacting and forming different parts of your body. So you'd have different plasmas coming together to form your liver or your heart, and they're all interacting and connecting with each other through this magnetic gravitational fields, as tiny little magnets. And each element has its own magnetosphere, but in combination, you know, one has its certain strength. When you add 2 and 3, it creates a bigger strength around that. So that was just a very small taste on trying to get some sort of understanding, and just to show you that one really has to start thinking from a plasma point of view. And it is a bit difficult for a lot of us that have had some sort of science background. I know I've had a lot of science background throughout my career. And the way I look at it is I need to understand how the plasma operates, how the plasma works. And then I can relate it back to what I was taught and what I was taught now, how that might fit into this new understanding of the plasma. If you try and take your science that you've learned and try and fit it into the plasma, it's not going to fit, and be very difficult to do that. So one has to really understand from the plasma point of view, and then you can see how everything that you've learned, okay, how that fits into your understanding of the plasma. So it's very difficult. Takes a while to start thinking purely from a plasma point of view, but once you begin, it's like training your brain again, training yourself in exercise. If we always start thinking from that plasma perspective, then it becomes easier and easier. But the minute we try and cross backwards and forwards and think from, you know, the matter physical state that we've been taught, then we just create a lot of confusion for ourselves. So it's important that you go and learn the science for yourself, understand the science, because it makes it a lot easier. And as we said early on, when you understand the science on how the plasma operates, then you understand how your soul operates, and it becomes easier then to operate your soul. That's essentially where all this is leading us to. Okay, so that was the end of that. It was just a very short, brief intro into that little whole bit. But it just gives you some food for thought, and hopefully encourages you to wanting to learn some more and really go and explore this new science. Any questions?
Jim, this is Moshfik again. Can we go back to that diagram of the two plasmas interacting when you were explaining the molecule, the atomic interaction to create the molecule of sodium chloride when the two, yes, one flowing into the other. Not this one. This one is the interaction between the amino acid and the sodium chloride. I'm talking about the sodium and the chlorine, the interaction that you have a diagram earlier than this one, I think.
That one?
Yeah, and you had this one, the magnetical going to the gravitational end, the South Pole to North Pole, those two lines, one with that. Yes, that's the one. Now here, this is the parts that's pulling things together, but the two North Poles are, the repulsion is from the two North Poles at the top and the two South Poles at the bottom. And Mr. Keshe went into this quite a bit in one of his presentation, but this is the part that's pushing things away, and the flow from the north to the south is pulling things together. Am I making sense or not?
I don't know if you want, I've got these two close together, so they need to be further apart to show the flow.
No. What I'm saying is that the repulsion is from between the two. There is another force acting, which is not there in the diagram, which is the repulsive force between the South Pole and the South Pole and the North Pole and the North Pole, which is what's keeping things apart. And this is the flow that creating the flow between the two, the ones that you showed here.
Yes, I haven't put those in because we just wanted to start slowly.
Okay, all right.
But yeah, I suppose I should put it in and you get the full picture. Any other questions?
I don't see any other questions in live stream, Facebook, or YouTube.
Okay.
Anybody else here?
There's no other questions, and we can just call it a day.
Last call.
No?
Okay.
All right.
I could. I don't mean to interrupt if you're going to wrap things up, but I thought I could show a couple of minutes clip of sensing the fields with that crystal radio detector circuit I was discussing earlier. It's kind of fun to listen to, and maybe it would be interesting for people.
Yeah, okay.
So let me share.
I'll just close up by saying that next week at the same time we'll have Dr. Gatwa that will come and present, and he will be going through a lot of the definitions and concepts so that we can get a better understanding of those. All right, go ahead, Rick.
Okay, let me just get it shared here. Okay, I think I'm good to go. Let me share the screen. Okay, I'll just begin. Let me set it up. You see the 3 reactors that are shown on the screen here. They're rotating. And what I'll be showing is a wooden stick with a very simple crystal radio circuit on the end of it that only has a diode and a resistor and a capacitor. And it's basically the simplest circuit you can imagine. And it's hooked up to my computer through a sound application. So let me play it and you'll listen to the sound of the rotating reactors. And this is not the electric motors that we're hearing here. Okay, let's go ahead. Fields actually come out like a vortex from this. There's virtually no field directly above the reactor, but off to any side there is.
Yeah, it's like a torus or a field or a donut-shaped field.
Yes, the real dead spot in the center. It's a toroidal form, kind of like a big donut around this.
Rick, do you think
If I go out to the sides, it's loud all the way around, but not in the center. Interesting.
May I speak?
Yeah, what I was, just a second, what I was doing there was removing the charge from the sphere, thinking that it's a charged sphere that was rotating. So I was removing it with my hand to see if it made a difference. And just go back to, I think I'm going to go back to it there in a second. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that Mark?
Yes, it is. It sounded very similar to, remember the video where he took the plants and transcribe or put it through a computer program to hear a sound? Don't we have some video on that somewhere? It's very similar to that.
Could be. This one's gotten really strong, and I don't know why. Can't give it any logical reason why it's so much stronger now.
Yeah, very similar.
For some reason. Other than it's interesting. Anyway, must be just the woman in it.
In a certain ball.
It seems to be more constant in the center and undulating around the outside.
Well, there you have it. And then
Rick, do you still get tones when the motors are off?
yes, you can, like for example, I'll put it on here, and I'll turn the motor off. In fact, I'll just pull the power to two of the units and then the other one here. Let me see which one's which. Yeah, this is to two of them. So pull the power to the other one. You can almost still hear it even when it's really slow. It's just low frequency then. I'd have to retune my audio program to pick it up. Okay,
Rick, I have a quick question for you. If you turned the reactor horizontal, would the toroid field that you're picking up there, would that stay, would that go horizontal with the reactor, or would it stay vertical with the magnetic field of the planet?
Well, that's a good question. I'm pretty sure it stays with the reactor, but I would like to do some experiments with the reactors aligned to the magnetic field of the Earth and then not aligned to it and so on, like you're saying. Like right now, it's neither aligned nor perpendicular to the magnetic field, because where I'm at in the northern part of the planet, the magnetic field is actually quite an angle. It goes into the ground at almost a 45-degree angle. So I would have to just tilt the whole apparatus at about 45 degrees and test that. That's a good test. Thank you. Okay, so I just wanted to throw that in at the end. Is there any other questions, or shall we?
Yeah, Klaus had his hand up. Klaus Studebauer.
Okay.
Yes, please. How do you call it again?
There's some feedback coming through someone's microphone here.
Rick, can I ask something, please?
Yes, go ahead.
Hello, it's Cedric. How do you call this the thing that you built to measure the fields?
It's a very simple crystal radio circuit, And you could look up crystal radio circuit. This particular one is part of it comes as an amulet actually, and it's just has the diode. It's called the 1N34A diode, and a capacitor and a resistor and a piece of wire and sort of a coil that goes around. And I've just wired that up to an audio plug, and the positive and negative leads of a regular 1/8" audio plug. And you can see that there in the picture close to the palm of my hand. And that wire goes back and feeds into the audio plug of the computer. And then I use a program called Audio Hijack in order to alter the sound so that instead of either just static or a high frequency sound that we couldn't even hear, perhaps I transform the sound into something that's easy to hear and easy to evaluate. So it's, I've done experiments with that, with crystal radio circuits. If people want to check into that, they can look at the playlists I have on my Mr. Fix-It Rick YouTube channel. It's MRFIXITRICK, all one word. And I've got a number of experiments with crystal radio circuits and so on, and listening, and I found out that this simple circuit can actually detect a whole raft of fields, anywhere from the audio frequency right through to light frequency, including the edges of ultraviolet and definitely infrared, and the full light spectrum, as well as the electromagnetic spectrum, as well as the magnetic spectrum, all from this simple circuit. So it's quite versatile, you could say. And of course, you get radio frequencies as well, which sometimes these apparatus give off as well. So there's room for experimenting in this simple circuit. It can be made, modified to work even better, perhaps, but simplicity works better than anything else, I think, with this kind of system. If you can have something that gives audio feedback to what you're doing, then you can make modifications and actually listen to the sound that comes back, and that gives you an indication of some difference that's going on there. Like, for some reason, this one reactor with the CH3 had a lot more energy coming off of it than the other two. So I don't know why exactly. It makes sense in the sense that the CH3 is our energy Gans. So maybe it gives off more energy. That does absolutely make sense. And
Rick, what was in the other two reactors?
There was the copper oxide in the back one, and the CO2 Gans in the front one there.
Okay, so the copper oxide one and the CO2 one, they were they were more gravitational. Is that right?
Perhaps you could look at it that way. Mm-hmm.
So maybe the energy that you were hearing was the feeding, because the CH3 was the giver, and the other two, because they were more gravitational, were receiving.
That makes sense. It makes sense that the detector would pick up the fields that are given off rather than the fields that are absorbed. That does make sense. So the CH3 is the giver and gives off most of the fields more than the other ones, then it makes sense that that's the ends up being louder in the pickup.
Are you able to somehow reverse the polarity of the antenna so you could listen to gravitational?
Well, I don't think it works that way. I mean, maybe it could work that way, but the idea is, it seems to be that if there's some kind of fields being given off, then that's what you would read rather than the fields that are absorbed, because whatever is absorbed is by definition not given off.
Yeah.
It's sort of like be like trying to you know, do something like reading radio waves from a radio station is one thing, but trying to go back to where the radio waves are going back to or something doesn't quite work. Yes, go ahead.
Did you test it with your hand?
With my hands? Yes. I've tested, you know, reactors and so on with my hands, but I don't always trust my just the feelings with my hands, because sometimes it can be influenced by the wind that comes off or the heat or just the angle and so on. So I like to have some sort of other kinds of feedback, but you know, this kind of detector may be entirely the wrong path in terms of feeling the fields, but it does give some sort of feedback as to fields that are being given off. It may not be the same fields that we feel perhaps, but it's nevertheless in some realm of fields, the same as we don't feel radio waves, but there's thousands of radio stations around us at this very moment that we could be detecting if we had a detector. So which fields do we want to detect from these reactors is the question, I guess. And what fields are we able to interact with our you know, human physicality, and which ones do we interact with perhaps on another level altogether? So these are the big questions that still need to be answered.
I think it's awesome that you've able to show definitively a toroid field. That's absolutely fantastic. Well done.
I thought that was pretty interesting, as well as the fact that it was not the electric motor that had to do with it, because that was one of my initial impressions that, oh, it's just the electric motor, and I kept using the sensor around the motor and it wasn't picking up any noise from the motor. Strangely enough, you'd think it would, but it was getting it from the orb, and even when the motor's totally shut off, and in fact it even seems to be louder when the motor shut off, and so on, and you can pull the cord right out of the motor altogether, and it's nothing to do with any of the circuitry. It just has to do with the rotation. You could rotate it, you know, on a string and make it go fast enough, and then you just start to pick up the fields from it. So it made me realize the more we get these things away from motors and away from electrical interferences, it's probably the better. Some of the motors are quite noisy and would tend to overwhelm the signal that comes out of the reactors themselves.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, Rick. This is Klaus.
Mm-hmm. Hi,
Rick?
Klaus. Yes, go ahead.
When you make the next test, please go a little bit up, 40 to 45 centimeters. When I look into this, this vortex opens up a little bit higher above the reactors. And there you have the interference zone. It's nearly 40, 45 centimeters above of this. And then you go in the center and look at this. What we hear now is Kepler called it the harmonice mundi. It's the sphere harmonics, what you have between these reactors, what I hear and see. And I make also an interesting experiment or experience when I make the first coatings on copper plates. I do it in the box and give it in the corners. I can show you this, and I see in this box it was sealed and the wet condition, and only the surface of one side become nano coated, and the other side, on the back side, they have no nano coating, and we see how strong the field builds up in the center of these boxes. if you want, I can show you at last one picture that you understand and see this. But for the next time, please try to come from the upper side in the middle and a little bit higher. And then I'm interested what you hear.
Okay, thank you, Klaus. Yes.
Okay.
Hello, Richard. Hello, everybody. It's Mernaz. I remember Mr. Cash said if you forget the name, if you put your hand and you rub the hands together, then you create the fields between the two hands. You remember that? Okay. In Qigong, when they rub their hands, usually they relax their mind, they relax body, and they rub their hands together. And then between these two creates qi, energy, right? So it's interesting to see when you rub the hands and you put it and you measure it, what kind of field is it? What kind? Is it like CH3 or what? Because sometimes, for example, I can feel how what's the length of this chi between the hands. I mean, I'm used to feel it between my hands. So I'm sure that there is the energy with there is plasma, and maybe you can experience with the palm of the hand after you rub them together.
That seems to be one of the techniques, yes. Klaus, did you want to share that picture you were talking about before we go?
Yes, please. Can I share?
Yeah, I think you can if you try to go ahead there, or...
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, but I find no button to share here. I have only question answers, chat, and
You should be able to do it now.
We lost Klaus's...
I had to bring him in as panelist.
Okay. There we go. Hi, Klaus. Are you back? Can you share now?
yes.
Flynn says you should be able to share there now. Okay. There we go.
And oh.
Hello, Klaus?
You can hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Couldn't before
okay,
that.
thank you. That was the first picture. And when I put off the ceiling, and you see on the front side, there's nano-coated. Oh, sorry, I have to reshare. No, the next time. Come back.
Yeah, we're not seeing your picture yet.
Okay, and on the back side, there is nothing nano-coating. I have to look at this picture. There's only the free surface from the copper. And they are in these wet conditions, and the field is so strong, like.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the picture right now, but
okay, sorry.
We got the visual from your description, but
so no, and
okay.
Now I look at the second picture that you can see that the other side of the plates not nano-coating. But it was in this box, and there's a wet condition in here. And right in this center, there is a so strong field that they cannot go on the back side of the plates. I have to stop and look at the other picture. I come in 10 seconds. see.
Still not seeing a picture yet. Ah, there we go. Yeah, it's quite a difference, all right. We're not hearing your audio, Klaus.
Here, no, you can hear me. Only the front side was nano-coated and the back side nothing. It's very interesting how strong the field built up in the middle when you put the plates in the corner like this.
Mm-hmm.
Field was always in the middle. And so we see also when you work with the reactors and when we work with the fields, there are interaction points and there are the strongest fields where they build up new field. I call them field ignition, and then comes new fields up. And this field what built in this middle was so strong that I cannot go into the backside of this plate. It's only my experience. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Klaus. That's fascinating.
Thank you too, Jimmy. I think I have shown you these pictures 2 years before in the growth and garden sections.
I remember the
Yeah.
Okay, are we
right.
done for today, I think?
Yeah, I think we're done. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Thank you, Flint and Vince and Rick in the background there. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was a great first session here. Thanks, Jim.
Yes, thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
So it'll be same time, same place next week. This has been the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute public teaching for Monday, February 5th, 2018 with Jim McDonald, exploring plasma science. Don't forget, coming up tomorrow afternoon, this will be 4 p.m. Central European Time, is our 26th One Nation, One Planet, One Race for World Peace public meeting. And of course, you can always catch more of Rick and his reactors there with the Keshe Plasma Reactor Group. That's Wednesday mornings at 7 a.m. Central European Time.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. So that'll be the end of this session today. There'll be a little bit of music here while I finish up the streaming.